Hello and welcome to Digital Lessons Automakers and Suppliers Can Learn from Other Industries. This Automotive News Power Training webinar is brought to you by Proficient. We're delighted you're with us today for this excellent presentation. My name is Philip Nussel. I'm the online editor at Automotive News in Detroit. And I'm speaking to you from my home in the Ann Arbor area. You're not far from Detroit. Before I introduce our speaker today, I wanted to give you all a few navigation tips. First, we encourage you to ask questions at any time. You just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit submit. I will steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. To enlarge the slides, just grab the frame with your mouse and you pull it larger. And to download the slides, you just click on the folder icon at the bottom of your console. So today's speaker is Jim Hertzfeld. Jim is the Chief Strategist of Digital at Proficient. Jim and his team listen to Proficient's clients to understand their customers, competitors, and top challenges. Then they tap into what's possible and build big ideas around customer experience to drive growth, improve the brand, and strategically grow clients' business. Jim has an expansive resume of experience in the automotive supply chain, and he's also from the same hometown as myself in Toledo, Ohio. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim to get us started. Jim, have at it.
Great, thanks, Phil. Great to be here today. Neighbor and childhood friend. So, what a great coincidence. As Phil said, I'm part of the strategy team at Perficient, and one of the things that we love about this role and what we're able to do is really draw on and see what happens in many other industries, and that's why we thought this was particularly relevant topic, given many factors today. So, Phil, as you said, I'm based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as well. And just before we get too far into it, I just wanted to kind of reach out to our friends in Plano and the rest of Texas. Hope you guys, if you're here, I'm glad you made it. It means that you're powered up, and we hope that you're safe. We're thinking about you up here. We've got about 2 feet of snow. If you're in Southern California, we're really sorry to hear that it got below 50 degrees today. So hope you're doing okay. Anyway, today, I want to give you a broader perspective. But before I go too far, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about Proficient. Again, I'm based in Ann Arbor. Been in and out of the supply chain for the automotive supply chain for a long time. But we have about 35 locations across the globe, close to 5,000 colleagues, and we consider ourselves a digital consultancy. And what that means, to put a little more color on it, and to give you an idea where we're coming from today, is I mentioned we work with a lot of industries, focusing on using digital technology to build a better customer experience to help brands and clients get closer to their customers. There are a lot of ways to do that. There are obviously there's a lot of technology, but it's a confluence of not just technology, but how the business might operate, how content and data come together. And we want to share a few of those ideas today, and hopefully we give you guys some things that you can use. Another part of the bigger background, I think, that has driven a lot of my work, our work as a whole, is really based on how digital has evolved, not just automotive, and not just consumer markets, but several different categories across the board. And I think part of this, what's interesting about this is, when we talk about digital has created these opportunities, but digital has also sort of a way to get around and take advantage of these opportunities. But because of digital, because of many things like the Amazon effect, because of the accessibility of information and data and content and product information and self-service, customers are more informed, and they're more in control than they ever have been. And again, this is not news, I think, to most of us in this webinar, but the effects of that are that really every customer journey, every buying journey, every bit of awareness and consideration almost exclusively starts online, and most likely on a mobile device. And because so many of the transactions, and then we'll get into kind of what the last year has given us, is that that experience, and particularly that digital experience, becomes the brand experience itself, right? And because of some of that accessibility, switching costs are low. And this is, again, what we're facing in many industries across the board. I think what's equally interesting, and we might call it disruptive and unique to automotive, is an emphasis on mobility, on from either connected vehicles or in the types of features and expectations that customers have from their vehicle, that is way beyond just getting from point A to point B. The emphasis on on the environment, and particularly electrification, advances in autonomous vehicles, which allows us to get even beyond drivership, and even ownership, but just to usership. So I think most of us on this call are probably well aware of that. I think it is something that is unique to the industry, and certainly colors a lot of problems that you guys are solving. And we want to give you kind of a perspective on being able to calibrate, what your customers or your potential customers are thinking in terms of the way they buy, the way they use your product, the way they come back. So what that has meant, I think, over the last 10 years is that a lot of companies, a lot of brands have adopted a broader program of digital transformation. And one of the questions we get a lot is, well, how do you do that? What does that entail? It entails a lot of things. And one of the questions we get is, who's driving that? And I think in more and more, we're seeing a CEO role. It's kind of come all the way to the top. It's not just isolated to an IT or a marketing concern, but is really a shift in the entire way that the organization is going to run. And but that is still mostly sort of homed in the IT side, the CIO or the chief technical officer. But the reality, and I think we've all been experiencing, and this was all just kind of a setup, is what literally has led digital transformation for many folks. If you hadn't seen this meme, I had to pull it out, is COVID-19. So it's hard not to talk about this concept of expectations and competitive pressure, and how many different industries have really had to react to survive over the last 12 months, and how that has shaped the expectations when it comes to, particularly to automotive. And so gathered a couple of other interesting data points. This is, I think there was some instantaneous data. Back in March and April, we saw, for example, we work with a client in the craft industry, and so obviously people are at home, they're finding things to do, they're starting to stay occupied, and they had an immediate response, immediate influx. In fact, what they said was they had 3 weeks of straight weeks, every single day, of Black Friday volumes, both in their stores and in their digital experiences on their website. And so we knew that there was an immediate spike right away, right? People, and it was really, from my perspective, an activating a lot of business continuity plans. So how do we keep people working? How do we make and meet our basic commitments? And I think there was some great data, but I was really anxious about the data that was going to come out retrospectively, the data that was going to evolve a year. And so at the end of the year, McKinsey did a great study, and we're going to play with it a little bit. And what they found was that customers had tried at least a new behavior, who had, was upwards of 73%. And and I'll give you a personal example. For me, I'd never tried DoorDash before. Pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty obvious use case, and obviously there was a lot of that. But what was interesting to me was how that evolved into not just a new experience, but the share of a digital experience across an entire brand. And so what we found, and I thought, there was been kind of a steady increase, steady growth in expectations that customers are having around their digital experiences, but it's primarily a multi-channel experience. What we found by the end of last year was, we're well over 50% of those interactions are digital. So whether it's doing a build and price, or scheduling an appointment, or having a dialogue with a chatbot, this is what folks, because again, simple necessity, because they can't go out. We have no choice. What's interesting is, again, I think we've all experienced that to some degree. I think what's interesting is how then that has immediately shaped the expectations. And so some of this data also shows not just the number of organizations. You see at the top, obviously, remote work, just sheer necessity. So we're not surprised to see that. What's interesting is which of those are going to continue. Which of those are going to, if we've gone remote, when are people going to come back to the office? Are they coming back to the office? Have we found a new way? But I think from a customer and consumer perspective, some of those expectations have changed because so many consumers have tried different things and been successful at it and had a good experience. A lot of organizations are working. Then they're working effectively, and they've made the changes that they need to make. Some of these are going to stick, and the expectations are going to continue to grow. So what we did is drawn that conclusion just one step further. So if you look at the things and you look at the direction that some of these changes, both organizationally and in terms of customer expectations or customer experiences, you see that there's an obvious difference, an obvious jump ahead. Again, on the left side, you see things that just sort of have to happen. These are some incremental improvements. But because so much of the market has been drawn into these new experiences, become comfortable, because so many other brands have successfully adapted to them. There's an obvious persistence that we're going to see, and I think that it sort of bears it out in a lot of ways. I think we're not surprised to see this. Personally, we see expectations across categories driving a lot of adoption and behavior. And I love this quote from Bridget Van Krandlichen from IBM. We use this a lot, and I think this resonates when you start to think about making decisions about what you're going to do to drive a better customer experience. And she said the last best experience that anyone has anywhere is the minimum expectation you want everywhere. So if it went, and it doesn't really, and the category is sort of seamless at this point. And so if they had a good, we talk about Amazon to death, but if I had a great personalization experience, a great recommendation anywhere, not just Amazon, with another consumer brand, with a financial advisor, with my bank, I kind of expect that if it can be done here, it can be done somewhere else. And there's no good. It's hard to kind of understate the effect that Amazon had, and I just love the succinctness that Jeff Bezos made here. Yesterday's wow becomes today's ordinary. So I think we all experience this on our own. I think there's a lot of intuition here that we agree with, but what is, I think, interesting, and there's some research around this as well. There's a couple of models. One of them is called the Kano model. That for product management, a lot of these things are sort of endemic and built in to the way that traditional product managers work. But as we think about digital experiences, some of these traditional product management strategies need to be adapted to the everyday interaction. Again, if you believe that every interaction is going to describe the brand, then it's vital. And so I love this concept that that as new experiences emerge, as new innovations emerge, some are going to work out, some are not going to work out. There's this old notion called crossing the chasm. We try something, it may or may not stick, right? So if you look at, I go back to 3D TV, a lot of hype around it. It just, was it going to be the next best viewing experience? Turns out not so much. It didn't quite cross the chasm. But when it does, then it becomes expected. And so if you think about a number of things, if you think about, we talk a lot about personalization, digital personalization. How does a digital experience, how does a brand get to know me? Um, so if in what's sort of, and as these things evolve, they become basic expectations. So in the zone of tolerance, sort of basic expectations, I would submit is that if I interact with a brand once or twice, if I've given them a sliver of information, I expect to be remembered. If I still feel like, I've been loyal to a brand, and I still don't feel like I'm getting some basic um, uh, uh, personalization, very the most simplistic terms. I feel like I'm just taking a number. That's a bad experience. If that brand can predict what I like and is graceful about it, and then I feel like that's a desirable. That's an unexpected experience, but it works. And you can kind of carry this concept out. Again, if you are both have a digital and a physical business, and it works reasonably well, and you've given me a couple of multi-channel options, that's great. But I really want more of a seamless omni-channel option. And as that becomes a higher expectation, if that's not there, I'm going to be disappointed. Shipping is consumer ship to home is another example. I think in 2012, the average ship to home time was 8 weeks, 8.5 weeks. In 2016, it was down to 2, or maybe I think going right into right at the end of 2019 was about 2 or 3 days. I still think we're there, but right around the corner is same day shipping. That, and if you think about just in terms of a vehicle, you think about driver assist, a standard cruise control. It's an expectation. If it's not there, I'm probably not in the market for that vehicle. I stumbled into adaptive cruise control. I bought a car a few years ago. Didn't know this feature existed. I love it. Now it's required. I bought another car. It was on my checklist. Autonomous might be next. So I think this is, again, you go through hundreds, you go through thousands of these interactions that evolve over time. They go through this life cycle of crossing the chasm, and then becoming simply expected. And so as we go through this, I wanted to give a few examples to sort of demonstrate the way how some of these out of category experiences are making their way into this zone of tolerance and in the zone of expectations. And then I want to give you guys a couple of different tools or a couple different ways to think about it. So when we talk to our clients a lot, there are a lot of ways to figure out what to do next. And I like to say that there's no shortage of ideas. If you walk down the street or browse long enough, you're going to find new ideas. The trick is how to figure out the ideas that are going to work. And there are a lot of ways to do that. Obviously, there's traditional market research. There are surveys and insights and third-party services. There's experimentation. There are dozens of ways to do that. One of the ways we love to get started is really kind of sit back and start to think about your target audiences, think about your buyers, think about the journey that they go through. And as you go through it, as you sort of take an inventory, start to compare them to the equivalent experiences that you have. And we like to put things in kind of two categories. What do they expect from us, from the brand? And what are they used to from the outside? And we're trying to find that gap. And I think this is a great exercise to go through. So if you start with sort of the first experience, and we'll start in with a really simple one and kind of almost a cliche example. But if you start with the experience of a waiting room, and whether it's at the dealership or it's at the dentist office or, God forbid, it's at the DMV, it's something you sort of have to plan for. I don't know how busy it's going to be. I'm not sure who's going to be there. I'm expecting to wait. I'll build that into my plans. I'll leave work a little early. I'll take a longer lunch. I don't know what what I can expect, and it sort of feels like they're not in control. And again, this evolution is about consumers feeling in control, just the opposite. And so, I'll start with kind of a cliche, and a neighbor of ours up here in Ann Arbor, which is the Domino's Pizza Tracker. Now, this is not a new innovation. In fact, it's a few years old, but I will tell you that I run into customer after a customer who cites this as the type of experience that they want to be able to provide. So it's sort of a classic digital example. And if you kind of unpack what's going on with Domino's Pizza Tracker, it's sort of simple psychology, and part of that is, of course, Domino's has this 30 minutes or late guarantee, but there's something about being late but being informed that is palatable to a lot of consumers. It's better to know what's going on and be late than not knowing what's going on and at all and having no visibility. And there's things like the Domino's Pizza Tracker, or tracking your package on UPS or FedEx, or having a product launch countdown, or waiting for an order to be fulfilled, or understanding where your prescription is at in between your doctor's office and your pharmacy. There's a tremendous power to just being informed and transparent, and quite frankly, it's a lot of utility. It's utility information. Again, it helps it helps the customer and feel like they have some level of control, that they're being listened to. But what's really fascinating about the Domino's Pizza Tracker and other similar process transparency experiences is you're also connecting the consumer to the process itself. You in some cases you get to see who's making the pizza. In some cases you get to see the ingredients that are going into it. Part of transparency, and Patagonia does a great job of this, is they're incredibly transparent about the sourcing of their materials. It's part of their brand promise to be environmentally conscious. So these are opportunities not just to be sort of utilitarian in keeping the customer moving, but also to create an additional, almost emotional bond. And so whether you're servicing, you're in the service bay, or you're going through a finance process, or you're ordering vehicles, or it's an aftermarket situation, then this is a great example. And in fact, I think a great example on the financing and leasing side is a pretty radical, maybe not radical, because I think there's some radical financial tools out there. But when you think about the lease and finance experience as sort of the only connection that the OEM at least may have with the driver, with the owner, that shift is not about paying down the loan. And it really has a lot more to do with the process of getting to your next vehicle. And so I think switching that, creating that transparency, in switching the dialogue a little bit, is not about, again, it's not about how many months and how many payments and what my payoff is. I would get excited about, hey, I have a 36-month lease, and about 24 months, into it, I look forward to trading in and trading up to the next vehicle. So it's sort of a different way of looking at it. I think it's a great borrow. So another one, again, kind of what folks are used to is and I don't want to pick on anybody, but we see this a lot, especially from the dealer side. Even some OEMs, even some pretty sophisticated OEMs, is scheduling an appointment for a test drive, a schedule, or a visit, and it's a form. And I think it's a great self-service connection. Maybe it beats walking in on the spot. Maybe it beats having to make a phone call, but it also leaves a little bit of ambiguity. Am I going to get a call back? When will I get a call back? Am I going to get spammed over email and SMS? And what happens next? So, what's the process I'm then going to have to go to find the right date and time that's going to be convenient for me? And so, leaves a little bit of uncertainty on the back end. And I love to use this example, to sort of describe what consumers might expect. And if you've ever used Opentable, and there are some other scheduling tools, Opentable is a tool for simply making restaurant reservations. If you never used it, I figure out when and where. So if I want to have dinner Friday night in Ann Arbor, what restaurants are available, when are they available, and I'm a couple clicks away. And it's a very frictionless process. I have complete transparency and visibility. And the more I do this, and the easier it gets, again, I start to expect that from other brand experiences and other categories. I happen to have a great utility like this with my physician, and good or bad, those are all remote appointments at this point. But it's very low friction, high visibility, high sense of control, and obviously it moves things along. So the form is great, but what if I could embed a schedule widget into a specific vehicle in the inventory? I'm looking at this vehicle. It just showed up on the lot. Thanks for informing me. I'd like a test drive. It looks like that vehicle could be ready Thursday night, 5:30 p.m. And what if that showed up in my driveway, and I could fill out any paperwork online, and I was ready to go? That's a wow experience. I wouldn't call it an ordinary experience, but if I'm for me, I think for many others, that's the expectation. And I'm certainly not equating a dinner out to a commitment in an auto purchase. But again, that small experience, that sort of incremental piece of the brand experience, starts to matter over time. So another one that I like, and I think these will start to get a little more sophisticated and a little more nuanced. Again, if I walk into a dealership, what I'm used to is I get out on the lot. Someone might come out and meet me. I might walk in, wait for an associate to be ready or a consultant to be ready. I may not be sure. I may not be sure who I'm going to get. I formed a relationship with a guy I like to work with personally. So, that's just how I prefer to work. But I think for the casual buyer, we're not really sure. And so it becomes pretty transactional. I think it starts to get at some of the fears and trepidation that people have as they start to buy. One of the things that we think might be a good expectation to bring in is what Neiman Marcus is doing with their VIP program. And before you say, well, wait a minute, Neiman Marcus, that's on a whole other scale. We're seeing this not just in Neiman, but other fashion brands, even some pretty narrow fashion brands, where because fashion is so personal, because it can be so sticky, because again, as folks move from the department stores, and again, this is Neiman Marcus's challenge, to an online experience is to replicate that level of personable interaction. So Neiman's does a couple of interesting things, and in the VIP program, which does require a significant spend, the level of this relationship increases. But what's great is it makes this takes this from a very transactional based relationship to a very consultative relationship over time. And I know a lot of dealers, these are what we call the sales team consultants. I think that's very smart. But what Neiman does, I think, really well is not only have they automated this and made this, frankly, more accessible. You certainly give the illusion of premium service level. As they're going from the same VIP service that you used to get in the store, and we're digitizing and optimizing over time. And so even though this is a very personal relationship, the trend and the growth, and I think we're seeing this in a lot of sales situations, is to do this over text, in a text exchange. That's how a lot of us, I think, know that's how a lot of folks would prefer to conduct their one-on-one interactions. What's great about that for Neiman is it creates data, and it creates a dialogue that can be analyzed with data over time. One of the things I really like about this, and I think I like about these personalization experiences, is it starts out with a matching quiz. And I would encourage you guys to go out there and try it, because you can be matched up with the right consultant. And there's a little bit of optimization there, making sure we have the right consultant with the right client, or right customer. But this is a fantastic case of consumers opting in for the level of convenience that they get. And what's amazing about the quiz is, I mean, it's an incredible research tool. So take the quiz. I'm not pushing Neiman, they are a client, but take the quiz, get a sense of what they're collecting, what they're understanding, the types of preferences that they're able to get. That alone is sort of worth the investment in my mind. But I think this type of opt-in for convenience experience is going to evolve. Again, if you think about sort of the finance experience as not a countdown to a payoff, but a countdown to getting my new vehicle, and building that inspiration and building that excitement and doing it with a consultant along the way, I think that's a pretty powerful combination. And so a couple more. I think what we're used to, and the Broncos a great campaign, great launch. So excited to see it coming back, especially right here in our backyard. But I think what folks are used to here is again a bit of a form here, but kind of putting my name in, putting my deposit, getting excited, hope my number comes up, sharing the date that I'm going to take delivery, and there's a lot of excitement, and it's a great campaign. I think there's tremendous longevity in these types of campaigns and these types of launches. But I wanted to share one that we thought is pretty interesting. This is from Reebok, and it's an experience they built called First Pitch. And there's a lot. There are a few fashion brands out there that do things like this. And basically, I'm going to start to categorize this as sort of crowdsourcing design and co-sourcing design. And there's actually there's a fashion brand called Beta Brand that's been doing this for a long time. They actually do spec designs, and they essentially get voted up. And when they reach a certain amount of interest, then they'll produce it, and it's a limited run. And this sort of builds on that idea. And the idea behind First Pitch is that we come up with a designer comes up with a concept, a prototype, and it's a shoe that doesn't exist yet except in someone's imagination and in a digital rendering. And there's a story behind that campaign. And in this particular campaign, this particular product, it was a shoe that was honoring a particular athlete. I want to say she was from Dominican Republic. I'm not sure where she was from. There we go, Guadeloupe. It's right on the screen. Anyway, French runner from Guadeloupe. French runner, I think, born in Guadeloupe. Great story. Killed it on the track. And they build a whole story around this, and there's a whole mystique around it. And the idea is to present this, and when they get to a certain number, in this case it's 500, when they think they can get 500 orders within 30 days, then it goes to production. And what's fun about this is there's a lot of fun things about this that, again, may be borrowed. How do you build excitement? How do you take, there's an anticipation, excitement about whether it's going to launch or not. Are there going to be enough, is there going to be enough investment and interest to do it? If I'm in, I get exclusive access. And if you guys know sneakerheads and folks that get around, that is a point of pride. There's a whole other industry, and I was going to borrow from another brand called StockX, around buying and selling, another Detroit brand, by the way, around buying and selling shoes, exclusive shoes. And it's a participatory experience. And that's the one thing I thought around this would be a great borrow, is how do we make, and I understand the sort of engineering and planning that goes into the way we engineer and plan for suppliers and manufacturers. But there are elements of this that could be brought into an option package, or a trim package, or an aftermarket offer or option. And the idea of just kind of building a participatory experience. So this one's a little bit on the edge for sure, but I thought it was a great source of inspiration, or a great example source of inspiration. I want to close with just one more, because and one of my favorites is this email list, if anybody's on it, called Barn Finds, and these are sort of classic vehicles in all sorts of states of disrepair. Some classic stuff, some literally found in a barn, under a tarp or a canvas. And what I love about this is they're great finds. If you're into cars, if you're a car person, and you love your daily driver, but you're looking for something fun, it's a great place to kind of poke around and look around. But what's great about it, and again, not new to email newsletters, but what's going to happen today? What am I going to find in Barn Finds today? It's something I look. It's so how I unwind at the end of the day is see what's out there. What I love about that, and what I think this starts to sort of reveal, or what starts to trickle in, is this bigger idea of or theme around building habits, forming habits in products. And so there's another brand, and there are a few fashion brands. This one's called Rue La La. I think they also own Gilt. And one of the things that they do is, again, similar to the last experience, is they have short run, limited supply, limited time. There are other brands like Supreme that, again, build these exclusive experiences, build these limited time. There's a level of scarcity to this. And scarcity is important. Scarcity obviously drives price, but it drives exclusivity. But the more important thing to me and to think about is how we form habits in that shopping and buying experience. And so again, obviously the frequency of buying a vehicle is not the same, but what are the expectations in understanding and building a habit customers, so that we can develop some habits for them to come back to the site, enroll in a newsletter, check my payoff status, understand what's new on the lot. And I think that might be a great, that was the connection to me. Is there a Barn Finds in for my Ford dealer, for my Volvo dealer, to see what's coming in on the lot? Is there an R series that you're going to get next week? Because if you ever get an R series again, I'm in. And so I like that. I like that concept, a little bit of anticipation, and again, sort of some edge cases that may drive a little bit of habit forming behavior. So I shared a few of these that may have sparked some imagination. I said earlier that there's really virtually no end to the number of ideas, and I don't think coming up with ideas is necessarily a problem for a lot of brands. I think how to do it can be challenging. There are obviously technical and legal concerns. There are regulatory concerns. There are the simple limitations of time and money and effort. And I think so. One of the challenges that we help clients, we want to share today is how do we accelerate that thinking? And so we've adapted a few things into this model that we call Now, New, Next. I think this would be homework. If there were a second a chance for us to meet again, then this would be the homework for you to do. But when we think about, let's say, the 100 things that you could do, the challenge tends to be, how do I pick the 20 that are most viable for my customers, for my buying cycle? And how do you take those 20 and figure out not just what's viable, but what's feasible? And so we start with this concept. We call it now and new and next, and it's really a way for us to drive and evaluate expectations as a way to make those decisions. And so, yeah, a rule of thumb that we apply on top of this is what we call 70-20-10. So here's how it plays out. If there are 100 things, if I have 100 ideas, I want to apportion about 70 of those to what's happening now. What are the expectations that I'm meeting today? And it's kind of up to you to decide, for example, is Opentable, is that something everyone's doing? Can I do better than a form? Is there a better way? Is that a worthwhile investment? Is that meeting expectations? New would be about 20%. So if I'm meeting what everybody else is doing in the way of expectations, is there something around the corner? And then we reserve about 10% for what's truly next. And that's a good starting point. But again, take those 100 things, which 70 and then which 70 are, or which are of those that are viable, which one's going to be in the now category, which one's the new, and which one's the next. Because there's always this tension between doing what you do today, taking care of where you've invested today, your sunk cost, your cash cow. Do we keep doing that? And what do we really have to invest in? Not everything is going to cross the chasm. Not everything is going to be a winner. Not everything is going to have the payoff that you want. So I love, scheduling to me, if I'm on the fence with some sort of online scheduling experience, that's going to be some investment. That's going to take a little bit of change and then change management on the side of the business. But if we think that that's what customers are going to expect and there's a payoff, then that's something that falls inside. If I'm going to crowdsource a trim package, obviously, it's a wild idea, may not ever work economically. I'm going to save that for the right side of the equation. But to take this a little step further is if you do some introspection. Take inventory, take what you know about your customers, how they buy. Think about the way that the experiences, the interactions that you're providing today. There's a tool called, if you haven't done journey mapping, it's a great way to sort of take stock and take inventory of what you have. But the first thing we would do is, or we would ask you to do in your exercise, is figure out what's parity. What we mean by that is it's what you're doing, it's what everyone else is doing. You offer service, you offer aftermarket parts, you offer coffee in the waiting room. You're providing lineage on the supply chain, and you're transparent about that. Then that's a great place to start, because you have to protect that parity. Number one. So we want to jump into innovative ideas, but let's make sure that we're maintaining parity. Table stakes is right behind that. Things that have fallen in, that maybe fallen into disrepair. Everyone else is doing it, but you're doing it. That's on the table stakes list, and those are things that you have to fix. So if you are taking inquiries over the form, but you're not responding to them quickly enough, that's table stakes, and you've got to fix that. The trending experiences are the ones that you and your peers or some of your peers are starting to deliver. And in this case, these are really kind of decision points for trending experiences. You have to decide, is it going to jump into table stakes and parity or not? And so typically these are being driven by new technology. It's become sort of economically accessible, but you got to decide if it's going to be core or part of a differentiator. And then emerging is stuff that's really maybe a pilot project. Yeah, very few people are doing it. It's far out of category. Some of the things I've shown today, it may have, it's worth testing, experimentation and testing, and so we want to bring those over into that bucket. And I don't want to forget about things that are differentiating. Every brand, every organization has something that really sets them apart. And again, this is really about protecting those differentiating experiences or elements of the brand. And then innovating is really at the far end of the scale. What is it that really and truly nobody else is doing? And so So as you start to take inventory of these things, you first take inventory of what you're doing and where you fit, and then as you start to collect these ideas, you can start to evaluate, whether they're really part of your market expectations or not. We think that's a strong driver to accelerate this decision making. We're not bypassing traditional market research. We're not necessarily um, um, uh, um, bypassing the traditional primary research and insights that you've done, but it's a way to jumpstart and start to narrow down what is what's going to move the needle. All right, so I'm going to make sure we left enough time for some questions. And Phil, I know we've got a few in here that we've collected, so I appreciate the interaction here. Let me take a quick scan here, Phil. If you want to jump in.
Excellent presentation, Jim. There's a lot going on in this industry. Tell us, we're speaking to an audience of auto insiders here, people who are established in this industry. And, we hear a lot about disruptors. We hear a lot about innovators in this industry all the time. And every day on Wall Street, we'll see a new special purpose acquisition corporation go public with money that comes out. It comes from everywhere. But, in your experience, tell your audience, what disruptors in the industry should be keeping them awake at night? Not just Tesla, that's the one everyone wants to talk about, but what are some other disruptors who are changing the game, and what's keeping people awake at night?
Strictly within automotive, Phil, or what are we hearing, or are we thinking cross category?
It's your platform, sir.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that again, I think sort of the theme of this was that you do have to be vigilant. I think in terms of driving, understanding. Again, I think the low hanging fruit here is understanding that where some of those disruptive experiences just from the last year are taking root. So I think I mentioned a couple things like, are we, as digital interactions grow, you really have to drive. Sorry, I just had a quick audio issue. I'm sorry about that. Things like, not just going beyond self-service, but how do we take things like curbside and digital interaction to the next level? So I think it's clear people, I think, are reticent about traditional modes of interaction. Certainly going to a dealership. Again, I think filling out a form is a tough one. I think the biggest disruptions that we're seeing or we're hearing about and we're getting inquiries about is really simple self-service. So I mentioned SMS and text messaging, some of the integrated communications that are taking a mobile or web app to a much more interactive, real-time, live, but not in person interaction. Those are the things I think people are. That's what we're hearing a lot of is converting those. And then Neiman Marcus example I think was a really good one. We're seeing this in other consumer products brands that are building more of a direct-to-consumer experience. So I think again, as a lot of I think OEMs are preparing for a direct-to-consumer experience, then planting the seeds for that type of purely digital interaction beyond, again, this beyond a website. This is beyond a shopping cart. This is a really multi-channel experience. I think that's kind of what we're seeing and hearing from others in this industry, and again with some of the adjacent consumer industries. Is you got to is thinking beyond, again beyond the physical channel, and thinking way beyond the web channel and having real-time dialogue. Again, if it's that's SMS. If it's an intelligent virtual agent, that wiring and being prepared for those modes of communication, I think, are going to are really what's driving a lot of consumer expectations.
Where do you suggest the average, the average person in the auto industry, whether it's on the manufacturing or the retail side, what are just some generally good places to go, either online or back in the old days in person? But what are good places for people to go to see innovation and get on the cutting edge of the kind of innovation that they need to know about?
Well, I think there's I think a broader movement, and this may be a bit of an unfair comparison, but I hear this a lot. Is the reason it's unfair is because it's captive audience. But if you look at financial services and utilities, now again, unfair because these are very captive types of audiences, right? We know. These are existing customers. They have lots of data about me. So it's a bit of an unfair comparison. But I think the element between that we're seeing and we're hearing other, again, cross-category comparisons to financial services, insurance, I would include in that, and in utilities, is this kind of move to more of a lifestyle a long-term relationship. So if you have, and so I think the way that some of those, by utilities, I mean energy, I mean telecom. When you make a commitment, and I know there's, because switching costs are so low, when you make a commitment, you're really looking to a financial institution or utility. It's really an extension of the household. It's an extension of making things more convenient for me, not just paying my bills and keeping my house warm, but saving me energy, right? And that's the type of relationship that I think an OEM or even a dealer can have as an extension of that household. And so we hear that a lot. I think that's a long-term trend that we're going to see a lot if you consider the types of things that households feel are valuable in their life and they want to spend time with, and those that they don't. They don't want to spend time paying their bills. They don't want to spend time making sure that they're saving energy. I'm happy to have a long-term partnership to make sure that the lights are on, to make sure that I have internet access, that my life savings is intact. And then I can travel from point A to point B. So I think that's a kind of a macro term element that I think gives those categories makes those categories worth a look.
Okay, let's scale down a little bit here. Talk a little bit more about smaller size projects that you might be able to recommend to our audience.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I hope you take away is that they're all big projects are several small projects waiting to get out. There's certainly capital investment, but I think in some of these, and there's internal technology shifts and transformation. I think what we see is the best approaches are more of a sort of a continuous improvement over time. And so one of the things we get a lot of questions about. Personalization. How do I personalize? How do I build a complex data program into my sales and marketing process so that I know and can relate best to the customers that I have. And I do think that's important. But I think what happens is a lot of those become large data science projects, and I mean science project, not data science project. And they become complicated. And I think what we found is a lot of brands work more successfully when they find a way to work with the data that they have, for example. We also see some brands sort of shifting, making the project smaller by not trying to personalize for every segment. So we do see manufacturers that are really going into more of a hyper segmentation mode, where they might focus on particular vertical or very small audiences within a small vertical, and some manufacturers and on the B2B side, even segmenting down to 50, even 60 customers sometimes. And so again, very data driven, but it doesn't require a mass customization lift, which can be pretty expensive. So I think experimentation is important, which means rapid decomposing that experience into small interactions, and then applying experimentation to those interactions over time. But again, a couple of things that I see. Everyone asks about data. And I think the challenge, and I think there are ways to be active with the data that you have that don't require an excessive lift in terms of the data infrastructure.
All right. I guess we have time for one more question here. We've got. Walk us through a little bit more about how you work with your clients, and what kind of initiatives are you what's the hot topic right now that you're being asked to do, and then how do you engage with your clients on this?
So I don't think there's a single client that isn't asking about personalization, and they're doing that more. When we think about personalization, there's sort of two halves to that. There's personalization that's driving acquisition and traffic, and there's personalization that's focused on conversion and retention. It tends to fall in one of those two categories. So acquisition or engagement. Everyone wants to know. I think it's almost universal, and this hasn't. Again, it's not even new, but personalization, number one. I think number two, there's still a lot of work to do around an omni-channel, again, both from a transactional and an engagement standpoint. Self-service priorities obviously skyrocketed last year. Mobility, and I think what we're hearing, probably again, particularly on the manufacturing side, and bubbling up more and more is around a direct-to-consumer relationship. So bringing that where they can, or being ready for that direct transactional relationship, and that can be original equipment, that can be in more cases aftermarket, but it could be services, and so we're hearing that's probably the query that we get the most, and so we get engaged in a couple of spots. It's sort of what we call strategy, which is the what, why, and how. So helping them make those decisions on priorities. Again, sifting and sorting out the 100 ideas that we have down to the 20 that are most viable, and then we work with once those priorities are established, we work on designing and engineering the solution that's going to work for your customers.
All right. Excellent presentation, sir. That brings us to the end of this webinar. I want to thank today's audience for its questions. And if you wanted to ask a question but you didn't get a chance to send it in to us, send it anyway. Perficient will follow up with you by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour, and you'll find it at autonews.com/powertraining. When the webinar ends, a survey is going to pop up on your screen. Your feedback helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial to you. And just a reminder, it was on the previous screen, but if you want to reach out to Jim, he's at jim.hertzfeld@perficient.com. Sounds like the kind of person I'd like to work with myself. So thanks again today for Jim and Perficient for bringing us this excellent presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.